You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game, and we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this evening because we have as our guest Ron Magers. Well, Ron knows a lot about politics and public policy. He's going to tell you he doesn't, but he's been covering news for like the last 4 decades. He's a guy who remembers about Robert F. Kennedy. He remembers where he was when he was shot, and with good reason. We'll get to that. A lot of people in the news these days don't even know who Robert F. Kennedy was. So Ron, well, he's an anchor, of course, at ABC 7 News, anchoring the 5, 6, and 10. And, well, the last 14 years or so, you've been doing that at ABC 7 News, right?
Yep.
And before that, it was NBC 5, right? And a little break in between. You've been doing it for about 16 years. And
30 years in Chicago.
You had that incident. We'll come back to that maybe at Channel 5 with you and Carol Maureen and Jerry Springer.
Yeah, a little incident.
A little
bump in the road.
A little bump in the road. And prior to that was Minneapolis and San Francisco. Yeah. And then when you started back in college and high school in Washington and Oregon. And
I started in radio when I was in high school, and I thought I would use radio as a good job to work my way through college. I was a troubled youth. I went to 5 different colleges. I like the record to show that I left 2 of them voluntarily. I continued to work in radio, actually never intending to stay in the business. But one thing led to another, and the next thing I know, somebody offered me a job in television, and then I grew up doing news.
So you've seen multiple presidential elections. Presidents come and go, and Ron Magers is there anchoring the news, breaking stories, being a contributor to the news stories, not just reading the copy. And you were in Chicago as Barack Obama was growing up as a politician, so to speak, in the state Senate, then running for the U.S. Senate, and then, of course, running in 2008 and winning. And so, you know, we're taping this show. It's April 29th. It's about 3 1/3 year into his presidency. How's he done? Has it been, would you say, everything you might have expected from Barack Obama, having seen him as a state senator, seen him as somebody who came sort of out of nowhere, at least as far as the nation is concerned, to become president?
I don't think anybody would say it was as they expected. I think his detractors thought it would be much worse, and I think those who really supported him were anchored in change and hope. And there hasn't been that much positive change, and there are a lot of things not to be hopeful about. So I think it's been a very difficult presidency during a very difficult time. I think, you know, anyone who would have stepped into that job was facing great difficulty with the economy the way it was, and it goes back to Bill Clinton's campaign. It's the economy stupid, as James Carville coined.
Well, that was in 1992.
And that's,
right?
Yes. And
when Clinton beat George Herbert
that's right.
Walker
Bush. And then along came Clinton, the Democrat, who became, in my view, much more like a Republican, and for my taste, Clinton was a pretty good Republican president. He did some interesting things. The economy helped him greatly. The economy boomed. He left office with no deficit. I mean, we can hardly imagine something like that.
Was he just a lucky guy? Was it his economic policies that worked? Because we were just coming out of a recession as he got elected. People would say George Herbert Walker Bush took the hit for that.
I think so.
He was President Bush, number 41 President Bush, would argue that he did things to get it set. Had he been reelected, he would have been the successful president. Instead, Clinton was. Putting that aside, but that whole presidency was marked by the booming technology, a change in technology, all for the better for the United States and the world. Was Bill Clinton just, again, lucky and he sort of rode that crest? Or were the economic policies of Bill Clinton that succeeded for those 8 years?
I would say try making that argument to any successful CEO in America. If you're at the top of the company and the company's doing well, and as the economy is doing well, a lot of CEOs stand up and take credit for that. That's the way American business has always worked. The way I look at it is Bill Clinton was the CEO at the time, and he deserves some of the credit. I don't think we need to take any of that away from him. There were a combination of factors that worked for him, but there are a combination of factors that work in all of our lives. Everybody who works hard at something and has some success must also admit they had a little luck.
Does that mean that Barack Obama must take the hit? Because he said, as you recall, in February of 2009, he said, pass his stimulus legislation, about $800 billion. If you folks do that, you the Congress do that, unemployment won't go above 8%. As you know, unemployment went above 8%, went above 9%, went above 10%. It's still above 8%. It's been a slow, sluggish recovery. Does Obama take the hit? Yes, they were difficult times, but he didn't do what he said he would do.
I think you can make that point, and while it is a fact, and is something I'll have to deal with, and I'm quite sure it will be one of the Republicans' campaign commercials, you also have to say, we didn't maybe tank as far as we could have tanked. And beyond that, I think the delicate dance for Mr. Obama right now is, 18 months ago, I don't think very many people would have given him a chance of being reelected. With the economy improving that much, we now give him the chance for re-election. So the economy has taken him from the depths to the point that he's above water, I think, at least, and in many polls, as you know, leading Mr. Romney. So I think he has to, in this strange way.
Not by much, though. Not by much.
Yeah. But I think in this strange way, while the economy's still in a difficult place, he's already riding a little mini crest because of the economy. Now, there are a whole bunch of other issues Republicans are going to come and get him on, and he's going to have a very tough time. But I don't think 18 months ago you would have given him a chance, and today you have to.
Well, what about the price of gas? Now it's come down a little bit. For a while, there was over $4.50 a gallon. It seems, at least in Chicago, I'm seeing maybe $4.10. A fill-up is still $70 or so, $60 to $70 for filling up your tank. If that doesn't get significantly better come November, is that a significant problem for Barack Obama, the price of gas?
I think it certainly is a factor, and you see Republicans already trying to make it a campaign issue. So yes, it certainly will be a factor. How much of a factor, nobody knows. You know, anymore, elections, as you well know, are about wedges. They are about wedges that you drive into political constituencies to either split them apart or create divisions you can take advantage of. And gas prices will be one of the wedges. But there's also immigration and women's rights and foreign policy and gun control and abortion. All of those little mini issues that add up to political experts parsing and dividing and deciding things like, if we can get 51% of that wedge, how does it compare to getting 49% over here? Elections aren't the sit back and take the big view thing that I think we in the electorate think they are. They are little issues involving relatively smaller constituencies where politicians are looking for the political combination to win, the mathematical combination to win the election.
Well, is this it? Because there's a book. Here's a book. We can get this, see if we can get focused on it. Game Change by John Heilemann, Mark Halperin. Can we get a focus on that? Mm-hmm. You know, it's now a movie. Did you see the movie, Ron?
I have not.
Okay, you know the general theme of the book?
I know the story.
Game Change?
Yep.
So is that what you're talking about? It's kind of like a football game.
It is.
And you or a baseball season. And you get a new athlete on your team, and you want to know, does that athlete change your team? Is it a franchise player? Has there been a change in the game? So this book sort of is about, one of the things it's about is when McCain's there, he's looking at in September or before September, and he realizes he's got a problem, maybe more so than others realized, because some of the polls showed it being relatively close, and he decides he has to do something to change that game. For him, he needs a female, he thinks, Sarah Palin, to somehow jazz up the ticket. So he goes in that direction. It doesn't quite work. So is there, if you stick with that football analogy, you know, who wins? It's blocking and tackling. So what you're saying is it's not the flamboyance of Mitt Romney or Barack Obama or lack thereof, but it's that grounded out. Look at Ohio, look at Florida, look at Pennsylvania, look at each state, then start looking at the counties, look where the vote is going to be determined. So in those key swing states, in the key swing areas, where do they put their resources? And maybe they just need to win. So you just need to do the blocking and tackling
absolutely.
So they can win.
And much of the blocking and tackling is out of our sight. The campaign, we know the Republicans have had a campaign. We've seen all the campaign commercials that gets all the press. The Barack Obama campaign started as early as the Republican campaign did. And the Barack Obama campaign that most of us don't see and aren't aware of takes place on the internet, on social media, and it works down to what used to be the precinct level in Chicago politics, but it's much slower to get there now because you can accomplish so much electronically and technologically. Take, for example, Barack Obama running on hope and change, and one of the things he talked about was he was going to deal with the immigration issue, and the Latino vote went significantly for him. He hasn't done it.
Why are they still? Why are they still with him? Then?
Now he desperately needs a Latino vote, and now they have to figure out how to get the vote without making it look like they're admitting they're really sorry for not accomplishing what they said they would. I mean, that's a pretty delicate dance, and that's extremely important in this campaign.
And is that vote, Romney doesn't have to win it, but if he could significantly cut into that cut into the Hispanic vote.
That's one of those places.
And can he do that given his views on immigration? Can he talk about, there's a whole ethos of the Hispanic culture that fits in many respects more with the Republican culture than the Democratic culture. The whole pro-life issue. Hispanics aren't so keen on abortion. They're not so keen on gay rights for homosexuals. They're not so keen on the idea that people shouldn't work hard and get rewarded if they do work. All of those are sort of, Republican ideas, would you say?
Well,
or Republican aspects of the Republican culture.
While we can
would you agree with me?
We can say, I don't quite, because while we're talking about parsing and dividing and wedges, the campaigns will look at those parts of the Latino vote. They'll look at the parts of the Latino vote, and they'll look at better educated, second or third generation, urban Hispanics and Latinos, as opposed to the more general Latino stereotype, and there you start to get some changes. So I don't think that stereotype holds quite as true as it once did. We found that out in Chicago in many different ways. People in Chicago in politics recognize, for example, there's a difference between West Side African Americans and South Side African Americans. There's a significant difference in Chicago between Puerto Ricans, Cubans, Mexicans, South Americans, Central Americans.
Some people say, but look at Luis Gutierrez. He's Puerto Rican, right?
Yes.
Some people say, to get the Hispanic vote these days, you have to be Mexican American. He's not. He's a leader in that whole group.
No, he had a huge advantage.
Same thing with...
Luis Gutierrez, remember, he had a huge advantage. He had the support of a mayor at the time who put him on the Chicago City Council and got him noticed. So he
mayor.
He was Washington,
which mayor was?
And he was and Luis Gutierrez was in Chicago terms, he was a trailblazer. He was a groundbreaker. And
even though he was Puerto Rican.
Even though he was Puerto Rican. So
I
think he was. The arms were able to go around him because he was one of us.
Are you saying Marco Rubio couldn't crack into the Hispanic vote because he's certainly Hispanic?
I think Michael.
But he's not Mexican.
I think Michael Rubio is almost essential for Marco Rubio is almost essential for Romney
to be his VP nominee.
I really do. I don't know that he'll do it, but
because of the Hispanic vote, or for other reasons too.
I think for a variety of reasons. He's young. He's energetic. He's Hispanic. He has conservative credentials in his home state, but has been a successful politician. I think he means a lot of things to Romney. I think he's a big help.
And
I also don't think he'll do it.
Really? So you take him at his word when he says he doesn't want it?
Yeah, but I take
why would he not want it?
Because in 4 years he might be the presidential candidate.
Well, because he thinks Romney's not going to win.
And the only path to make sure you don't become a presidential candidate is to be a vice presidential candidate and lose. Those guys we tend not to hear from again.
So you think he'll actually turn it down? Because it doesn't get turned down too often.
No, hard to turn down, but I think he'll do everything he can to discourage it.
All right. Well, let's go over just to the, we'll take a detour from Obama in a second, but while we're on talking about cracking into minority votes, the African American vote, is it possible that Mitt Romney could crack into the African American vote? Republican presidential candidates, I think, get nationwide maybe 11 to 12% of the vote. In certain areas, if they were to up it to like 15 or 20%, that could tip certain states that are swing states where the African American population is substantial. Do you think there's a shot? Mitt Romney, could he have a shot of seeking and then getting a significant increase in the African American vote?
I don't think so.
It's not in his genes, it's not his makeup, it's not his style. What's the
I don't
problem?
think so.
Issues,
I
culture?
don't think so. And I think while there are African American Republicans who did not vote for Barack Obama, and I think they won't vote for him again, I think if you look at the African American vote, you have to say, again, like Luis Gutierrez, this was the trailblazer, this was the groundbreaker, this was someone who we felt so much pride for, about him and about ourselves, and now to say, gee, I'm going to vote him out, that's a tougher decision.
Well, but there's this elite group of African Americans, a segment of that vote, people who've gone to college, people who've striven, who've done well, who've achieved, may look at it and say, you know, that's, again, some would say that's part of the Republican culture more than the Democratic culture. And so for those folks, and here's an idea. Education is said to be one of the major issues, right? You hear this in Chicago all the time. Mm-hmm. You hear about the failing Chicago public schools. We had reform in Chicago in 1995. You were here, you saw that.
We've had reform every 4 or 5 years.
But especially in 1995, because that's when the mayor was given control, large part given control of the Chicago public schools. And yet 17 years later, there's virtually no significant improvement. I mean, it's some, but you still have at least half of the Chicago public school population, maybe more, not reading at grade level, not doing math at grade level. You have 6 of the folks who actually graduate, and half of them don't graduate, only 6 of the people who graduate from the Chicago public schools go on to get a 4-year degree in the next 6 years. A complete failure. You agree?
I do.
So if a Republican comes along and says, what I want to do is empower parents, you know, the argument, school voucher, school choice, we now spend, it sounds incredible, we spend $15,000 per kid per year. And Mitt Romney were to say, well, it's a state issue, it's a local issue, but I want to encourage that. I want to say, as President of the United States, I wouldn't do what Barack Obama did, because he closed down a successful school voucher, school choice program in Washington, D.C. He and Arne Duncan, his appointee, closed it down. So could Mitt Romney say, okay, instead of closing it down, I want to open it up, I want to empower parents. In Chicago, you're getting $15,000 spent on your kid, you don't like it, take the $15,000 and go to the private school of your choice.
Does that
do you think if he could do that,
Does that tip a little bit of the vote? Maybe. What I would
there are
say,
a lot of kids,
what I would say
is
we can't get most parents in Chicago public schools to come and pick up a report card. Do you think they're going to take advantage of a voucher system?
You know
That's
why?
the real problem.
No, because you know, Ron, if you knew that your kids were getting a lousy education, and you knew they weren't learning how to read or write, and you knew it probably didn't depend what you did, it's not going to happen for a variety of reasons, because those teachers are not trying to think of the various ways in which they could improve the quality of education, how they could teach these kids how to read. Admittedly, these are difficult problems. These kids are not at ideal homes. There's drug problems, there's violence problems, they're not being read to. But that being said, you take a school like Hales Franciscan, those minority parents, they're no more driven, I think, on average than many others, and yet they turn out, almost the whole class goes to college, African American low-income parents. So they're doing something right, and maybe, Ron, if the parent thought it would make a difference picking up the report card, maybe they would.
It's a hypothetical. And
why doesn't Romney take that chance?
My experience is in Chicago that we talk about reform, and what we don't recognize is there's a strong division. Kids who want to do well with involved parents and parents who want to do well find places in Chicago public schools to do well. Parents who don't care with kids who don't care are a significant part of the problem.
Well, I differ, and let's go over to Rahm Emanuel, because that slides right into education. Rahm Emanuel, give him a grade. He's been there almost a year. A, B, C, D, F, what would you give him?
I think I have to give him something between an A and a B.
Really?
For this reason.
High grade.
For this reason. I find it fascinating that a guy who's been involved in Democratic politics as long as he has, and a guy who knows Chicago as well as he does, has been willing in his first term in office to immediately step on some toes, including union toes, and that just hasn't been done in Chicago politics for so long. I've been stunned by it.
But he didn't rely on the unions. He basically said, I don't need you, I'm going to win without you. He did win, he had union support.
Sure he did.
But it was somewhat split. Chico had some support.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't as Barack Obama ran and won with union support the President of the United States. Without, I mean, the head of SEIU basically had an open door into the Oval Office whenever he wanted to. Now he's left. But, you know, that's how close the SEIU was to Barack Obama and his win to become president. Nothing analogous with Rahm Emanuel. He doesn't need him. He could thumb their nose at him. Now, why did he back down? He said it's important to have a 7.5-hour day. He said to Karen Lewis, we need to do that. I don't care whether you agree with it. And they put up a fight, and Rahm, you're giving him an A, between an A and a B? He doesn't even stand up to Karen. What do you say? Okay, 7 hours, you win. She went out and got some parents to agree.
How does he lose by going to 7 hours?
Well, I don't know. He's going to get 7. He doesn't have 7 yet.
You're good with politics. You're good with politics. He ended up with a 7-hour day, and it looks like a compromise to you?
No, he doesn't have the 7-hour day yet.
No, he doesn't.
He's only asking for 7.
He doesn't have anything yet.
Yeah.
He doesn't have
anything
yet.
He doesn't have bupkis yet.
But I'm fascinated that he's willing to have the fight. What other mayor have we had in recent years who would have had that fight?
Well, but my point is, you went back and you said the kids who want to do well, the parents who want to do well, they do. No, not true. Because kids line up to get into charter schools, there's waiting lists, and they get turned away, Ron, turned away.
We have all those issues. We have all those issues. My point is, what we tend to ignore in Chicago is we've got a significant percentage of the population that has almost dropped out. And you said it earlier. Half of the minority kids who start high school in Chicago, who start school in Chicago, don't graduate from high school. Half.
Well, half, almost all, 80% of the kids are minorities. So half of the kids, they just drop out. They go to the streets. They sell drugs. They do whatever
and they have kids.
Yeah.
And they don't care about their kids' education. And that we've never been able to get our arms around that part of the problem in Chicago.
But we know there are private programs, essentially. Knowledge is power, KIP, okay? There are all sorts of programs that take these kids with all their problems and they succeed. And they are private efforts, okay? We could do it. Rahm Emanuel says he's for charter schools. 1 year has passed. I don't know that he's got any more charter schools. 8% of the kids were in charter schools when he came. 8% of the kids are in there now. It's only 1 year, but what the hell is he doing? I don't know that I'd give him an A. I mean, he said the most important things were 3, education, right? Fiscal issues and safety. Are the streets any safer? I don't think so. Are the schools any better? I don't think so. Finances, a little better. I don't know. I'd give him, you didn't ask, but I'd give him a C. Yeah. The media, they're just sucking it up. They're slobbering all over him.
Let me be clear.
Are the media slobbering all over?
Let me be clear. No, I don't think they are. Let me be clear why I said I give him between an A and a B. Because so far he's been willing to have the fights that nobody else has been willing to have.
Yeah, let's see him win some fights. Let's see him win some fights.
I'm giving him a high grade for having the fight.
Well, I want to see him win some fights. Okay. We've covered Rahm. We've covered the president. You've been in news for 40 years.
I guess.
Yeah, time goes by. You plead guilty, right? It's been 4 decades, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You've covered Chicago extensively. You've covered other cities. What's different? Everybody, you know, here's one. People used to say, the line in news, local news, if it bleeds, it leads. Don't you think that's still the case at 257, 9, 12, Fox,
I don't
WGN?
think so. I don't think so. I mean, we do, you know, we invest a lot of money in investigative reporting. We have a dedicated political reporter. There are a whole bunch of areas we do.
That would be Charles Thomas, who was just on last week on the show.
Right. Chuck Gowdy does investigative reporting with a staff of people. We invest some resources in doing significant stories. One of the challenges I give to people when they talk about what is news and how does the news work, and why isn't there any good news, why is it all the bad news, why is it, and I'll give you this challenge. Pick a newscast, any newscast, I don't care whose it is. Sit down, take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. Good on one side, bad on the other. You keep track of every story you hear, and you tell me whether that was good news or bad news, and then look at the balance at the end of the night.
Whether it was a good report, or whether, what do you mean by good news?
In your subjective judgment, whether it was good news or bad news. Rod Blagojevich is convicted. That good news or bad news?
Oh, I don't even look at the news that way. My point is journalism in Chicago being practiced at 2579 WGN and Fox such that people are actually getting more than somebody was shot, there was a fire, there was a murder, there was a rape. I've done this. I could document. I haven't published a dissertation on it. I've flipped through and I've taped 2, 5, and 7. The news is virtually identical in that half hour. Look, you know this. Your first 8 minutes or so is real news. Then we shift over to weather. Then we shift over to sports. Then we say hi. We're all fun. Big smiles. I'm being a little tough because you do some good things. And Channel 9 and Fox have to be given credit because they've got an hour of news. And I'm telling you, Ron, they beat you in terms of covering politics because that extra half hour allows them to give much more detail. And I know where your heart is, but maybe it's a matter of just the ratings, and maybe you would say to me, you know, Jeff, people don't want to hear that much about public policy. We do some investigative reporting. You do it, I understand. And you do some on politics and public policy, but the core of your news is, if it bleeds, it leads.
I wouldn't accept the if it bleeds, it leads. It'll be different every night depending on what happened. There is a huge difference between our newscasts at 4, 5, 6, and 10. Each one of them will have a bit of a different personality. One of the things we do live with at 10 is, research shows us over and over again, that most people who watch news at 10 o'clock want to know what's happened. They want the big story of the day. They also want to know what has happened between 6 and 10. And we try to give them some of that. We also try to give them the big story of the day. We also try to give them some feature news.
Some national news.
Some national news if they are big stories, but the 10 o'clock isn't typically a national broadcast. You know, there have been national broadcasts earlier in the evening, right. But if there are big national stories, certainly we'll cover them. We'd like to cover them with a local angle. Would be the best way for us to cover a national story.
All right, so 14, 15 years ago, you're there at Channel 5, things are going well, somebody peeks in and says, look, I'm going to bring Jerry Springer on with you and your colleague, Carol Marine. Basically, the two of you say, hell no, and you both quit, right?
Yeah.
And that was a gutsy move. Because you never know how it's going to work out. They basically were telling you you're going nowhere. They were threatening you that, right?
Yeah.
You're either do it our way or you're finished.
Yeah, they were.
You can't because of the non-compete clause, right?
No, it was difficult. It was, what made that decision easy was it was the right decision. I'm not going to work on a newscast that has Jerry Springer doing social commentary. I mean, I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. So if I have to pay some consequences, I was willing to pay them. As it turned out, everything worked okay for me and for Carol. But yes, it was tough. I mean, it was tough to go home and tell your family, I'm going to quit a very good job, and they may sue me, and I don't know when I'll be able to work again.
But you stood up. We're going to continue to speak as the credits roll, but I very much want to thank our guest, Ron Magers. You can find him, as we just had, ABC 7 News, at the 6 o'clock, at the 10 o'clock.
4, 5, and 10.
4, 5 and 10.
5 and 10. I do the 5 and 10. But I want you to
10.
watch all of ours.
You
4, 5, 6, and 10.
You can also find them on WLS Big 89, roughly 3 o'clock to 3:20 on the Rowe and Roper show, right?
Yep.
Giving analysis and opinions, because you can do that. You can do it here. Charles Thomas said he can't give opinions. Actually, you can, can't you? It's okay. You would admit you can give some opinions, right?
I can give some opinions.
Are you a Republican or a Democrat?
I just had this conversation with former Governor Edgar last night.
We only got a minute. Give me an answer. Republican or Democrat?
I've always viewed myself as a centrist. I voted for moderate Democrats and I voted for moderate Republicans.
Tell me a president that you voted for who was Republican.
I voted for the first George Bush.
Oh, Herbert Walker Bush. That's the last time you voted Republican for president?
I think it was.
Would you say you're